Now, Mr. President, you've seen this speech a couple times, and I'm going to keep talking about it. Senator Murkowski is going to keep talking about it. Congresswoman Peltola over on the House side is going to keep talking about it. This is the bipartisan priority we have for Alaska and America. It's called the Willow Project. The Willow Project. People across Alaska are speaking unified in one voice about the importance of this very big, very environmentally safe energy project in our state. Republicans, Democrats, Independents in our state legislature, I believe, are getting ready to pass a resolution to the Biden White House and the Biden Department of Interior and saying, finally make this happen. Well, what is this? It's a very large project, $9 billion investment, 2,500 construction jobs, 75% of which will be the building trades, unions, peak production of 200,000 barrels a day into the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, not much infrastructure needed, highest environmental standards in the world, lowest greenhouse gas emissions of any major project this size, enormous support from unions, building trades, Alaska natives. Mr. President, I've been on the floor talking about this a lot. Last week, we were frustrated. I made the point that our friends in the national media never talk about who actually really supports the project. They quote lower 48 radical environmental groups, who don't live in Alaska, by the way, who are all opposed. We know that. They don't want anything built in America. Heck, you can't build a bridge here without groups like this opposing it. But what I said is listen to the native people. Listen to the indigenous people of Alaska, Mr. President. They want this. I've gone through all these groups, every major Alaska Native group, every major union, every major economic group in our state, across the country, supports this. So I do want to thank some of the reporters who joined me, Senator Murkowski, and so many of our Alaska Native leaders on a press conference a couple days ago. And guess what? They did start reporting on the broader support in the indigenous community in my state. Because prior to that, they were canceling the indigenous voices. The native people, the vast majority, want this project. So, Mr. President, I want to spend a few minutes on process. The process for this project is what we're in right now. All big projects on federal lands go through this. It's what you get when you have the federal agencies review a project. It's called an environmental impact statement, an EIS. And then after the EIS is issued, there's something called a record of decision, usually 30 days after that. So when that goes smoothly, you get permission to start working on it. We are in the final throes of that process. Now, it sounds a little bit boring, Mr. President, but what I want to do is explain what has happened. Because it's really important to know this project has been reviewed by different administrations, starting with the Obama administration, then the Trump administration, and now the Biden administration. And every single time, the career scientists in our federal agencies, the career professionals in the Department of Interior and Corps of Engineers and EPA, every time they've done the studies on the environmental impacts to review this project, they've passed it with flying colors. That has happened here in the Willow Project. Let me just give you a little bit of background, Mr. President. First of all, it's in this is an area of Alaska called the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. National Petroleum, set aside by Congress over 70 years ago for what? Think about it, National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. For oil and gas development. It used to be called the Naval Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. So it's not controversial. It's not like ANWR or other places in Alaska. This is set aside, makes sense. That's where all the oil is. Our country needs oil. So the leases in this area were first acquired, believe it or not, during the Clinton administration in 1999. The company, ConocoPhillips, all in paid a total about $120 million with rental requirements. So the company is paying the feds. It's a contract. And the feds say, we'll take your money and we're going to help you develop it. That's the deal. A lot of people forget that. That's the deal, right? So preliminary work went in. The producer filed for federal permits to produce in 2018, received final approval. This is after many years of exploration, and it went into the environmental impact statement process and reached a record of decision at the end of the Trump administration. Okay, sounds good. That was the professional scientists said, you can do this in an environmentally sensitive way. Unfortunately, all things get litigated in the great state of Alaska. The Department of Interior, after some litigation, said, well, we're going to do another environmental analysis. So the Biden administration did another environmental analysis, 2 more years, and we finally got the final environmental impact statement 2 weeks ago. Over 500 additional pages. And here's what this environmental impact statement from the professional staff of the Biden administration said. Similar to what the Trump administration professional staff said. That after the environmental analysis, the Biden administration, EIS, found that this project would not have a detrimental impact on climate, wildlife, people, places, things. Like I said before, it passed the environmental review. Here's a quote on the impact on climate. In the absence of production from Willow, energy produced from the project's oil would be replaced by other places, like Venezuela, where they're much dirtier in terms of their processes and greenhouse gas emissions. So the environmental impact statement even acknowledges this, Mr. President. These are the career scientists for our federal government who wrote this EIS. No political appointees, their career. So, 2 weeks ago, that's what you would think. We're going to get approval. Not so fast, Mr. President. There's 30 days left. 30 days left. And guess what? Every radical environmental group in America is coming out, knocking on the door of Joe Biden's White House, knocking on the door of John Podesta's office, saying, stop this. We don't care about the science. Just kill it. Wait, I thought the Democratic Party was the party of science. The science is in. The project is good to go. So, Mr. President, you can tell we're worried. Senator Murkowski and I are giving a lot of speeches on this. If they kill this, it won't be based on science. It'll be based on raw political power. Let me repeat that. If the Biden administration in the next 30 days decides to kill this project, it won't be based on scientists. Their scientists have already spoken. Their scientists said good to go. By the way, the Trump administration scientists said good to go. By the way, we know they're the same scientists, right? They're career federal employees. Doing a good job, by the way. So everybody's saying it's good to go. If it gets killed, we're watching. The enviros are knocking on the door. They're the only group, by the way, in the whole country that doesn't think we need an additional 200,000 barrels a day for America, 2,500 jobs. So keep a close eye on this, America. If the Biden administration kills it, it'll be the result of radical environmental muscle going to the White House and saying, kill it. Let's not let that happen. If you're watching, you care about American energy security, write BLM.gov. Tell them, approve the Willow project. Come on. Don't politicize this. You guys are supposed to be the party of science. That's what you say. Well, the science is in. Prove it. Mr. President, I want to make one final point here. And, it might concern some people, but I'm going to make it anyways. The department approved this, and then the Department of Interior, without any really acknowledgement of who said it, said that the department still has substantial concerns about the Willow project, including direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions, not sure what that even means, and impacts to wildlife on Alaska Native subsistence. Now, Mr. President, that's not what the career scientist said. Go read the EIS. Why would the Department of Interior put that out? Deb Haaland's Department of Interior, why would they put that out? They know that their scientists said this was good to go. What are they trying to do there? Well, some of us are nervous that they're trying to set up the killing of the project. But you know what's really frustrating, Mr. President? I mentioned this before. They mentioned that they're worried about native subsistence. Last week, we had all the leaders and the biggest experts in Alaska who live on the North Slope who know about native subsistence rights and hunting better than any group in the world. Better than any group in the world. And what is really maddening, Mr. President, is if the Secretary of Interior wants to know about native subsistence rights, which her department says she does, why wouldn't she meet with these great Alaskans? As a matter of fact, 5 different times this group has flown from the top of the world, Barrow, Alaska, Utqiagvik, Alaska, to come and meet with her, and she won't meet with them. 5 different times. Dozens of my constituents, who are the experts in the world on native subsistence, but she won't meet with them. Well, that's because they support the project, and they're experts on the issues that Interior is raising. So, I find that interesting, I find that disappointing. But let me just make one other comment. And you know what? Some of my colleagues say, hey, don't say this, Dan. You know, you're going to rile up the secretary. But I'm going to say it anyways. Here's something else that's frustrating. My view, even scandalous. Even scandalous. Our media won't ever report on this, but I'm going to try again. So, the Secretary of Interior is from New Mexico. Okay, that's interesting. Guess which state? My state can't get barely a lease. We beg, we make speeches, we fly dozens of people into D.C. to get leases on the federal lands in my state to move forward. Guess which state has gotten, in the first 2 years of the Biden administration, more than half of all federal permits to drill on federal lands? You think it's Alaska? No. Is it Texas? My friend from Texas is here. It's not Texas. It's not North Dakota. It's not any of these places. Guess what it is, Mr. President? Oh, my goodness. It's New Mexico. New Mexico. Isn't that an interesting story for somebody? The Secretary of Interior is from New Mexico. The senior senator from Mexico is from New Mexico, obviously. And they're getting all the leases. They're getting all the leases. And here's the thing, Mr. President. New Mexico is on a tear in terms of producing oil. Now, look, I have nothing against that. Country needs it. Country needs it. But look at these numbers, Mr. President. These are millions of barrels. Red is New Mexico. Gray is Alaska. We're kind of steady. We need more oil. New Mexico, red. Look at that. Holy cow. Through the roof. Through the roof. And guess what's coming with all that production? Greenhouse gas emissions. Through the roof in New Mexico. Where's the reporting on that topic? You know, sometimes the media likes to talk about a climate bomb in the country. I don't really like the phrase. I think it's silly. But if there's a climate bomb from production of oil in America, it's right there. It's right there. Now, again, I think it's fine that this state's doing well. It's good for the country. It's good for workers in New Mexico. But what I don't like, Mr. President, is the rank hypocrisy. The media is always focusing on Alaska, on our production, and look at this. 9,366 applications for permits to drill approved during the first 2 years of the Biden administration in New Mexico. Yeah, that's right, over 9,000. My state can barely get one. 52% of all permits to drill in the country, New Mexico. The secretary's from New Mexico. Where's that story? Where's that story? The Secretary of Interior has been shutting down Alaska energy production while approving massive drilling activity in her own state, and the media won't touch that story with a 10,000-foot pole. New Mexico has increased production by 700,000 barrels a day since 2019. They're at 1.7 million barrels a day. My state's at about 500,000. We're trying to increase. Where's that story, Mr. President? You know, the senator from New Mexico is always trying to shut down any senior senator, any oil development in Alaska. I've talked about it on the floor. I'm not going to go into it a lot here, but he's gone to extreme measures like writing banks and insurance companies to say, don't invest in Alaska. But it's drill, baby, drill in New Mexico. No one writes that story. And I think it's hypocritical, too, because the greenhouse gas emissions in that state are going through the roof. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, Mr. President. My state, my constituents, the Native people, the working people, they just want the most environmentally sensitive project in the world, which is the Willow project, to keep our economy going and help our country. That's all we want. And I think given what the Secretary of Interior is doing for her own state, like I said, drill, baby, drill, climate bomb in New Mexico, it's time to finalize the Willow project according to the scientists in the final EIS that was granted by the Biden administration 2 weeks ago, and not use political muscle and political power to kill a project in my state when this blue state is drilling like crazy and producing like crazy. I yield the floor.